Let's bring in Ed Snyder from Charter Equity Research. Ed, how much wiggle room is there, do you think, in this meeting and in the months ahead on the issue with Huawei?
Well, it's political, so it's infinite, isn't it? But if you're going to stick hone to the party line, it's going to be very difficult for the Trump administration to provide waivers to American companies while at the same time lobbying European allies to ban Huawei equipment from their communication system. So you wouldn't see, if you're going to stay consistent, there's not much wiggle room here at all.
So just to be clear, Ed, the administration so far, let's review. They first blacklisted Huawei, and then at this G20 truce, President Trump said we can work with Huawei, right, that the American telecom companies can work with Huawei. But then some of members of administration, including Peter Navarro with us, said there's still some security concerns, so it's not going to be so clear-cut. What exactly do we know about whether chip companies can do business with Huawei?
Well, right now, Huawei remains on the entity list, and for most companies, I would think almost all American companies, that's the end of the road right there. As soon as they were put on that list, we talked to many CEOs, just stop shipping that day, and they're not going to risk, the give and take of politics to start shipping stuff now and to run into trouble later. So as long as they remain on the entity list, I would expect most companies won't be shipping to Huawei. If the administration wants to make exceptions or issue licenses or special dispensations, that's completely up to them. But it's going to undermine their credibility in Congress and with allies if they start doing that for American companies. So I don't see where they're going to get around a lot of this. Either take it off the entity list or they don't. And if it stays on the entity list, you're not going to be shipping to Huawei.
Ed, switching focus, big week for tech earnings. Who are you furthest from consensus on? Where are you expecting the biggest surprise in the week ahead?
Well, in the week ahead, it's Qualcomm doesn't report for another week out. I think their troubles with the FTC and the U.S. District Court are much more serious than the market's giving them credit for, and that's under accelerated appeal at the 9th District Court. They won't talk a lot about that on the call, but I think the consequences will become evident in the next 6 months. Outside of that, I think the economy's shown robust growth here, and so a lot of the diversified names like TI and Intel will probably see better than expected now that you're over the Huawei hump and most of the bad news is in there. So I think we're positioned for a bit better of an outlook than most of the street was expecting, given all the bad news of the last 6 months.
How do you play the group, Steve?
So for me, when I look back at the index, the semiconductor index, it's topping out right here, or I should say it's right at the level where it did top out back in April. So I would wonder, and that would be my question to Ed, I would wonder if all of these run-ups that you've pointed out and that we see in the stock prices, are they already in the name already? Are they set up to fail when they actually, when the rubber hits the road? On the fundamental side, I think that a lot of this has been perception versus reality, and this is just more about leverage and positioning versus actual things getting better in the space. I think that's already in the price, and I would like to know what Ed's position is on it.
Yeah, it depends on the companies. They're very different. Companies like Texas Instruments, for example, are highly diversified. They're selling basically, semiconductor hardware to the world. So as GDP goes, so goes TI. They had a bit of a bump because of Huawei, because of Apple previously, but their results have been fairly decent now. I think your assessment is exactly correct. Perception versus reality. And we had quite a bit of bad news in the last, 6 months with Huawei, et cetera. You had a big sell-off late last year. People started looking at the economic news, the jobs reports. They realized the economy isn't as bad as expected. So my impression is from talking to folks that their expectations are fairly low. Depends on the names you're dealing with. If you're dealing with the cell phone names, it's a little more skittish because Apple hasn't done well. Now you got the Huawei issue. But in many of the names, I think expectations are fairly low going into the quarter in the second half of the year.
Ed, thanks for joining us.